Alright. So what I've decided, guys, is like within all the Disney era, there's right now, because we have Disney Grips, which is going to be it's going to be the entire catalog of Death Grips. But the album art's going to have little Disney characters like the Snow White birds and stuff on like the ex-military album. And there's like deer. There's like Bambi's gonna be on the cover, and like maybe like Mickey with like a wizard hat. Okay, Disney Grips, and then it's just it's a compilation of covers by the Disney characters. Okay, and they are all singing the vocals for MC Ride and Death Grips, but it's Disney Grips because it's now a part of the multiverse. When lyrics from Death Grips get get emulated in a real world somehow, right? Because that's kind of the tongue-in-cheek of Death Grips sometimes. It's like the real world applicatory, memeable like part of that existence, right? So Disney Grips allows you to access the esoterica parts of Disney's like weird interpretation of the laws, weird demonic crap, and Disney Grips allows there to be it allows Disney to traverse the fabric of time space through the perspectives of the brick walls that are Death Grips' experiences, right? So it helps dissipate some of the tension that those experiences are, because instead of Stefan having like Death Grips experience, and maybe we bring the comic back in and incorporate the comic into the Disneyverse, so we can then kind of add some more lore to Death Grips, and then Death Grips and like all of them, they can interact in the multiverse. I know, but we needed to, because if we can't have that and the Disney multiverse of Professor Fun's 500 Miles Through Hell, we need to help push that narrative up into existence where it belongs. Disney Grips on the multiverse contracted upon the whole establishment of mixed media. So you're able to pepper in now. That's why we have Disney Grips, okay? Because we can't have Death Grips in the place of certain things, right? It's not as kosher, but it's still accurate, which is why we need to have Disney Grips. And if we can get Disney Grips going, then at some point between the lines of public domain and intellectual property, and the novelty of Death Grips juxtaposed against a fixed frame of of cataloging, we can intersect the two and create an epic overflow of intellectual freemium. That all of that public domain is grippy, and Disney Grips is gonna help. It's just gonna help erase the boundaries and the illusions that society has in the visceral aspect of how Death Grips has interpreted the nooks and crannies that we are all actually also a part of, because it's within our 3D universe, which the multiverse, the Professor Fun multiverse, it gets crazy. But Disney Grips we have to have a Blink-182 like has to be featured, okay? And so like Blink-182 has this other part. They're very important in the multiverse because To the Stars is the whole reason, is one of the big reasons we have a Disneyverse, okay? So thank Tom DeLonge, because if we didn't have Tom DeLonge using telepathy to communicate to me back in 2022, we would not have me signed up as an investor for To the Stars, and I would never have had the idea to study aliens, okay? So, intellectual property, Professor Fun 101, okay? This is what needs to be intellectually sewn into the fabric of reality where it belongs, so we can add function, we can give me function in society that would then reallocate a wave of other happenings that would loosen and disperse some of these overly tasked things that people like Stefan have to look at day to day. Right? So, Disney Grips helps kind of dissipate the illusion between reality, okay, and the chaos and the erupt, more visceral kind of aspects of the Disneyverse in reality, because at some point we need to look at like Star Wars and how Death Grips would also then ascend through the multiverse using different forms of meditation and transcendentalism, right? So figuring out the kind of different route we can take for having Disney Grips and giving function to the barrier and breaking of the blurring, so that way no one's quite as innocent as they want to claim to be, since we're all born into sin due to the esoterica Disney is using to reference the Bible. We would then also have to reallocate function of demonic happenings and paranorma that have been compounded into Stefan's own personal hells, right? Which he talks about in a lot of different songs. So it would have to create enough synergy by creating parallels in between function, right, and lore mixed in with a solutionary kind of like tactic of having it covered and fleshed out, right? So ideally, they have full creative control, piggybacking retroactively to their Guillotine singles and New Moon, or whatever that one's called. Full Moon, whatever. Full Moon, New Moon. Maybe there's a Disney grip tied to Twilight, where there's some weird thing, they unlock a portal, okay? Heaven forbid poor Bella has to open up the freaking Pandora's box of Disney grips and like reach the heck in and pull some crazy crap out, because, well, it's good to have evil. Maybe it's good to keep it in the box which is ideally the synchronicities create enough barrier for Bella to not. However, there's always the potential within the Professor Fun multiverse for crossover and overlap, which would create staggering, basically. So, the Disneyverse in the Professor Fun multiverse and the function of like energy and the powers that be would also kind of have its own tension at play, where there's constantly like very chaotic, like, you know, there's movable variables that are just like kind of chaotically like taking place over anything that's also involved, because evil's kind of unpredictable. So if we have this little like faction of like this alien stuff, okay, because let's face it, they talk to aliens too, right? So Blink-182 is talking to aliens, Death Grip's talking to aliens, Professor Fun's talking to aliens, and we're all having telepathic conversations with Obama. Now, that's where things get crazy, because the CIA's like kind of like playing God, essentially. And they're connecting Professor Fun with a bunch of celebrities that, like, why would I ever talk to Jamie Lee Curtis in the first place? Other than, like, getting to actually meet her? But why am I having telepathy with these celebrities? So, like, it creates this whole synchronicity back there, where I figured out that I'm kind of clairvoyant, and so are many, many other people, and that's kind of where astral projection, a fact we can look at the CIA releasing, and then also applying subconsciously to the technology that they have access to today, right, would then enact upon the evidential bias that would create function upon some of those more outlandish claims where there's loose ends and ambiguity. However, watching those facts grow beyond their assumed potential would create more detail to function, right? Because essentially we need to be able to navigate without like screwing up nature, right? We need to be able to, like, that's like the bigger part of the multiverse, is having it organically kind of unfold. It's very that might be where like the Avatar movies come in, where they're like able to take humans and human consciousness and transport it into the multiverse. So they use the technology from these things and other stuff to create the physical threshold that we are basically tied to through our perception, right? So essentially, you would get this esoteric, like, rhythmic interpretation by Disney grips that would have this, like, very strange finger on the pulse, godlike kind of encapsulating, like, omnipresence almost, right? Because, like, all of a sudden, everything just gets a little grippy at points in the Disneyverse, because, well, we need Disney grips, because, well, we have death grips and it's great and they exist. They also need to exist beyond what's possible of existing, which is true, but we need to have that intellectual property function with other things, right? So you would have basically lots of off-gridding with, like, Banksy and, like, Shepard Fairey and other street artists, where, like, you're kind of getting this, like, strangeness to it, right? Otherwise, it would be hard to translate death grips in Disney, overlapping way. However, it makes sense when you incorporate magic, because that's basically how Professor Fun's multiverse exists in the first place, is magic. I'm just a very magical being, right? But now there's this like other little layer where I could be Jesus, right? Because I'm born on Christmas and I'm like Hawaiian and stuff, and like the aliens have told me that I'm Jesus, but everybody's a little skeptical. So like this is where we're able to take the blasphemy away from me saying outrageous, outlandish claims like that and basing it around, well, and then a kind of obvious, like I'm human, but there's something else going on. And I think that would give the intellectual part of the esoterica a little bit of my own interpretation and gas to be able to have accountability, right? Which is exactly why you would need something to kind of bridge the gap between what I know to be true and what is true, because otherwise synchronicities wouldn't have purpose in the multiverse. Things would sync up and it would just keep going. There wouldn't be any like, right, it would just there would be no function to other things. It would just kind of it wouldn't really have as much function. But when you create function to eternity, basically you give yourself wiggle room where places don't exist. It hasn't been filled out. So the language hasn't been invented, which is helpful in bands like Death Grips or Disney Grips, because, well, how else do you describe those experiences other than the way they sound and you perceive them when they do live or performances or whatever, right? So they would then be able to make bank, right? Because we all have to. But it also creates currency. So it's not always going to be money. Some of it's going to be like karma, right? Because like we need to have that balance of like function, right? And one of those things is knowing your own value, right? So essentially, discovering and learning creates XP and HP. Right. We need that magic, those magic points and experience points in the multiverse, so that way you can because you're gonna have to barter at some point. You're gonna have to take something seriously enough to sacrifice something you've gained XP from. So if you can then teach somebody, then you get to the next level essentially. But until you can actually teach somebody what the intellect and the level and the bar would be for that particular thing, you wouldn't be able to get as much access to it as much as you'd just be a part of the bigger picture of experience, the atmospheric wash, if you will. So the multiverse is gonna cater to many things, but when Disney Grips comes in, it kind of like really freaking surfaces, and everybody is like, right, everybody's like connected, because it would trigger the Stranger Things universe big time, okay? And then maybe like Paranormal Activity would also get triggered, because it's all very like non-human. So that's because you have aliens and demons, okay, and ghosts. So we need to kind of juggle out the different things. And when you have Disney Grips to come in to divvy up whether maybe it's Blink, Death Grips, and Skrillex or something like that. And whenever they have different things come on, it means different stuff in the Disneyverse. So Well, that would be really a cool way to